Hey guys, my name is Shelly Stewart. I'm an MC student in the Kinesiology Nutrition course. I'm going to explain the process of digestion and how our nutrients are absorbed. So digestion begins in the mouth with chewing and just basically chewing up the food into smaller pieces so that we can swallow it. In there you also have the salivary glands, which are right here. And this is supposed to be the mouth. With these salivary glands, they secrete saliva that helps us swallow the food and makes it a little bit easier. Then the second part is the pharynx, and the pharynx is a tube, is a small tube right here that is shared with the trachea and the esophagus. So the food just bypasses the trachea and comes down through the pharynx. The epiglottis, which is a little bit lower, closes off the trachea when swallowing the food so that we do not accidentally choke or have it go into our lungs. So the next part is the upper sphincter. It's about right here. At this point, the food has become a bolus, which is just the chewed up food that is mixed with the saliva and other fluids. And so the upper sphincter is a muscle, and it will open up and allow food to go down into the esophagus. This will close as soon as the food goes into the esophagus to prevent regurgitation. Once the food travels all the way down the esophagus, it comes down here to the lower esophageal sphincter. And this muscle will also open up to allow the bolus to come into the stomach. This will close as well as soon as the bolus goes through so that it prevents acid reflux. If the sphincter is not working properly, then you may have some acid reflux or you might regurgitate your food. So the food will come right in here into the stomach. And this is when the food turns into a substance called chyme. It is mixed with hydrochloric acid, and the stomach just kind of turns and churns the food to turn it into chyme, and its digestive juices are added, and it becomes a semi-liquid substance, which is acidic chyme. So then the stomach will begin to secrete tiny portions of the chyme into this sphincter, this pyloric sphincter right in here, and once the chyme comes in here, the sphincter will close off to prevent it from going back into the stomach. The pyloric sphincter releases into the small intestines. You can see it comes right to here, right behind the large intestine. So it comes into the small intestines right in here. There's 3 segments to the small intestines. You have the duodenum, the jejunum, and then the ileum. Many nutrients are going to be absorbed in here, which we'll discuss in just a minute. Once the food goes through the small intestines and has been absorbed, whatever's left over goes into the large intestines. I'd put a little white marking right here to let you know it comes in over here on the right side of the colon of the abdomen, here in this lower portion of the large intestines. Now the food will bypass the appendix, which is right down here. The appendix is just a little sac, and it really serves no purpose. Food can go into it, but for the most part it does not. So the food will travel up the large intestines, the ascending part of it, then across, which is the transverse colon, and then down into the descending colon, and then it'll travel through the rest of the large intestines all the way to the rectum. And this is kind of in the back of the body, so the rectum is. Once it gets to the rectum, the large intestines kind of pulls water withdraws the water from the substance so that it can become a semi-solid material, which would be stool. And then once that muscle in the rectum relaxes, it will then travel down to the 2 sphincters at the anus, and then once those relax, it will allow you to extract the stool. So I wanted to go over some important parts to digestion, and some hormones that are involved in this process, and enzymes. So we have segmentation, which is basically muscles that contract and relax to create the chyme in the stomach. This helps mix the chyme up with digestive juices, and it brings it closer to the intestinal wall. The next part of that is peristalsis, kind of goes along with segmentation, but it's the outer muscle of the GI tract, and it creates like a rhythmic contraction to help push the chyme forward. And so this peristalsis is a continuous contraction. It happens all day long. It just varies at different rates because depending on if there's food present or not. Enzymes are proteins that create chemical reactions by breaking, changing, or creating molecules. And the enzymes in digestion create a chemical reaction called hydrolysis. And hydrolysis is when water is added to break down a molecule, basically. The enzymes facilitate that process. You also have gastric lipase and pancreatic lipase, and these two enzymes pretty much work on just lipids, so they work on the fats that are being digested. The salivary glands, like we discussed earlier, do secrete saliva, but this saliva contains water, salts, mucus, and enzymes that begin the process of carbohydrates. So they only work on carbohydrates, but that actually begins in the mouth when the saliva is secreted. So, and then it comes on down. The gastric glands secrete juices that contain water, enzymes, and hydrochloric acid, like we kind of discussed earlier in the stomach. And this helps aid in protein digestion. So the carbohydrate digestion begins in the mouth. The protein digestion begins in the stomach. The gastrin is the hormone that helps secrete that hydrochloric acid. You have once the bolus of food empties into the small intestines, when it's ready to leave the stomach, at this time your carbohydrates, your fats, and your protein digestion has already begun. Now, at this point, the pancreas will begin secreting pancreatic juices that contain enzymes and will act on all three of those nutrients. So, and the pancreas is right in here. It's kind of on top of that stomach area. The pancreatic juice will release those enzymes to help with the digestion of the fats, carbohydrates, and lipids, but it also contains sodium bicarbonate, and this helps neutralize that acidic chyme, or chyme, however you say that, from the stomach so that it can enter into the small intestines in an alkaline state. The hormone secretin is what helps release the bicarbonate from the pancreas, which is stimulated from the chyme and released from the duodenal wall of the pancreas. Of the small intestine, sorry. So the chyme stimulates this process, and then the hormone secretin actually releases the bicarbonate enzyme. So the gallbladder, which is right here, is attached to the liver, which is right in here. The liver is always producing bile and storing it in the gallbladder. So once the gallbladder comes all the way down to right here, where you see that small intestines, and it just kind of squirts bile into the small intestines as soon as the fat comes through. So once the fat has arrived, the hormone cholecystokinin helps notifies basically the gallbladder that it needs bile. So The bile is not an enzyme, but it is an emulsifier where it helps disperse the fat throughout water, so that the enzymes can get to it. In the last stage of absorption of these nutrients, once the substance is in the GI tract, reached the end of the small intestine, so now it's gone through the duodenum, the jejunum, the ileum. All of the energy nutrients, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins have all been digested by this point. So these are our 3 main energy nutrients, and they have all been absorbed and digested. So along with most vitamins and minerals go along with them, have been absorbed, but the only contents that are left over are fluids, dissolved salts, and fiber. And that is what is going to go into the large intestines right in here. So the large intestines contains intestinal bacteria throughout it, and that just that helps ferment these fibers, producing water, gas, and some fats. And this gives energy to the cells in the colon to help with this process. So the colon takes the fluids and salts and that the body can reuse and just kind of puts it back. So it absorbs the fluids and salts that they can reuse later on. Everything else has no value or very little value, and it travels through the colon to the rectum and anus for extraction. So there is the process of digestion.